Has Sam Seder ever said he's a socialist communist? No. Has Sam Seder platformed a socialist that wrote a book about how socialists infiltrate political spaces all over the country and do not disclose that they're a socialist because they knew they wouldn't get their policies passed otherwise? Absolutely.
Virtually everybody I talked to for the book actually is a socialist or had said at some point to me, I am a socialist, but I don't necessarily lead with that in my organizing. And that includes even some socialists in New York City who were trying to organize in communities like the Bronx and certain parts of Brooklyn where they just felt like the word was not serving them and was not something that they could really meaningfully connect to the policies that they were promoting.
When Sam Seder is finally invited on a large podcast to have a debate, how does he politically define himself?
Political spectrum, where would you say that you identify, not the current form of identification with the he, she, we, they, them, like political spectrum? If there was a football field, where do you stand? Like 50-yard line, left, right?
I'm definitely of the left, without a doubt.
How far left?
I don't know. I mean, within the context.
Are you in the red zone? Are you near the goal line? Are you closer to the 50?
I don't know. I don't really think about it too much in those terms, to be honest with you. I mean, I think that I think a genuine socialist would say I'm certainly not a socialist. I don't know, but I have no problem with how people identify me in that way. I mean, I'm really more interested in a set of policies and really ultimately just the outcome of what will create the best outcomes for the most amount of people. For me, that's, and there's a couple different ways of saying that, but that's basically what it boils down to me.
So Sam's political leanings are just a guy on the left that wants to help people. That doesn't sound like he's hiding his power level at all. You might be thinking to yourself, I haven't heard of socialist communism before. That's when people on the left consistently equate socialism and communism to push people further left. Which is ironic because they usually say to people on the right, you think communism and socialism is the same. They're two different things. The point of socialism is to lead to communism, and they conflate socialism and communism all the time. Let me show you.
Hi, everyone. I'm very new to the show, but my wife isn't. You've managed to radicalize her into a full democratic socialist. So congratulations on that. I think I describe myself as a social democrat.
Isn't it so cute and fun how they can just gleefully use the word radicalize like that?
Because I think that a superb social safety net plus tightly regulated capitalism is best. But I'm also now just seeing how incredibly broad the term socialism is.
Socialism is just such a broad term. So we have like a social democrat, which then can be like a democratic socialist, which then can just be like a socialist, which then can just start to kind of lead you to communism if you're reading enough theory and Marx, right?
And I feel more confused than ever. Anyway, my question is this. In a society with no private business capitalism, how do you maintain creative freedom, especially for non-necessities, niche products, and outlandish/risky ideas, or the kinds of products that people don't know they want until they have them? As an example of all the above, let's say that someone has a great but unorthodox idea for a video game that caters to some specific audience. This game needs a big team with lots of different skills and widely different levels of passion for the project. How do you incentivize the non-passionate to do boring or difficult, though not unethical work without paying them? Even for the passionate, it could be difficult to retain their labor on something long and at times frustrating. I've given up on enough personal projects to know that very well. I'm interested in hearing all of your responses. I mean, I think what he's talking about with not paying is more communism, right, Jamie?
This is Jamie Peck, an open communist that used to be his co-host, but how useful is a communist when they're out in the open?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different versions of socialism and communism that people have posited.
Yeah, there's different versions of socialism and communism. They're all very different, but there's just different versions of them, socialism, communism. So we're equating those two concepts right now. This should be more rigidly defined, especially if you're going to be hosting a revolution in the streets over it.
I think with something like a video game, which I think most people can agree is not something that's really essential for everybody to survive, although, people may disagree on that. Matt may disagree on that. It's going to require everyone who's working on it to be passionate about it. And that's the idea behind communism, at least for me, right? It's to liberate people from having to work all the time at a job that they don't like very much on pain of starvation and devote their full creative potential to whatever drives them and whatever keeps them passionate. So if you need a whole bunch of other people to work on your passion project with you, you better hope that it's a really good idea, and then they will.
But what if there are things that need to be done on the project that are just not, I mean, as he says, I mean, just take for, as just to stipulate for the sake of this, the game needs a big team with lots of different skills, wildly different levels of passion for the project. How do you incentivize the non-passionate to do boring or difficult, though not unethical work without paying them?
Get a better idea. Otherwise, maybe your idea isn't that great in the first place.
I mean, I would just say that one of the ideals of a more socialist or communist economy is that...
All right, let's let this guy take a stab at equivocating socialism and communism right now. If it's like socialism or communism, it's probably like this one thing that I'm going to be talking about. This one concept I'm going to be talking about is like socialism and communism.
What you do for work is decoupled from your ability to sustain yourself just materially. And I think that would allow for a lot more people to follow their passions. I think the actual creative people will be more liberated in that sense. I mean, I'm less interested in getting rid of all sort of private industry immediately. That sort of thing. Like I think, or maybe you make everything co-ops legally, or like change the ownerships of that sort of. I don't know how because you don't want to have to have state control of every video game put out, right? Like that's not an idea of communism I would want, especially knowing our political class currently. So anyway, what do you say, Jamie?
I say let a million video games bloom. I mean, I could go into more details on how Marx wanted to actually abolish the distinction between work and leisure time and have all human activities just be things that we do in the course of life. Doesn't mean they're all going to be fun, but they're all just a part of life. And that's when we can really say that people are truly free. But I feel like maybe that's a topic for the Antifada to go into further detail on.
Folks can find that at patreon.com/theantifada.
That's a pretty healthy looking Patreon. Over 1,200 members. Of course they always hide their income. Oh look, they have a $100 a month option. I bet you get a lot of really good stuff with that. Pay pigs, it's ironic. Our ultra exclusive Findom tier. You will get nothing and you will like it, worm. Ha 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 ha. Communism. Give us your money and we're not going to show you how we're using it or how much we have. So now let's see what James Lindsay means when he talks about race Marxism.
We are actually going through in the West, throughout the West, and critical race theory is the racial component of this, is a cultural revolution exactly like what proceeded in China 1966 to 1976 under Mao Zedong. The only difference is that there's no Mao. There's no one central planner who is, taking over the whole power grab. It's diffuse. It's a cultural phenomenon rather than an individual phenomenon. And it is empowering a set of ideas. Whether somebody will rise up and to the top of this pile and declare themselves in charge of it or not is unclear. Probably not by the way it's being implemented, which is largely through kind of investment portfolio metrics, these ESG things we all hear about, environmental social governance. Guess what the social part is, is critical race theory.
Let's hear some of the critiques that leftists have of James Lindsay's race Marxism.
So, yeah, I mean, this is a little bit confusing to me as someone who I do take a keener interest in books if they're described as Marxist. In my understanding, when I would see a book described as, a critical race theory, I wouldn't necessarily dismiss it, but I wouldn't think, oh, this is just Marxism. I would frankly consider it a little bit lesser than. Can you describe how you understand the differences between these two traditions and why James might be trying to mash them together?
But his description of Marxism is as not an economic doctrine at all, which will surprise anyone who's read Das Kapital, since the subtitle is a critique of political economy.
And Marx spends a good amount of time, talking about the different prices of coats and shit like that too, very tedious.
It's called Das Kapital, and he's talked about the price of coats. See, he talked about economics. If something was about economics, you would be able to repeat back, capitalism, for example, and what that economic system is, and describe the free market and properties of it. Are we going to do that? Are we going to delve into kind of no, because you can't just there's no short version of what his economic theory is. You have to go through this laborious, vapid, nebulous, tedious gauntlet of word salad to then arrive at a different conclusion that everybody has at the end.
Yeah, that's the thing. You read it and you just think like, fuck, I'm just tired of reading about, how many textiles UK has produced. I can't go through it anymore. But you power through if you want to learn something. But no, it's not actually about economics, right? It's an eschatological doctrine that's offering the prospect of a kind of utopian future out there. And the way to achieve that future is through revolutionary agitation and ultimately violence. And Lindsay kind of takes a bit of the Stephen Hicks and Jordan Peterson line and arguing that original forms of Marxism eventually gave way to a more culturally oriented approach to trying to transform society as a result of various different failures. Now, I want to point out that this is a really bad take, and we can explain why it is bad. But that's more or less the kind of genealogy that he draws.
Very rarely do they call you wrong or incorrect. It's usually bad, dumb, Nazi, racist, transphobe. He said it was a bad take. He didn't say it was incorrect. It's a bad take because it's the truth that he doesn't want to deal with. How is it the truth? Let's take Sam's little pet pig as an example.
This is, everybody who watches my show knows who Jamie Peck is. Longtime Majority Report alum, has a show called The Antifada, and Everybody Loves Communism.
So I don't know how far they're really going to get. Like, it's admirable that they're trying, because what the fuck else can they do as bourgeois politicians? But I'm sorry if I'm a little bit skeptical that that's going to work, because that's not how we got anything in the past. Also, like the idea that we need to persuade the ruling class, that's how we get things. Like, I don't think those upper class wine moms are going to do direct action. Sorry. I don't think those upper class wine moms are going to do direct action. Sorry. I don't think those upper class wine moms are going to do direct action. Sorry.
Direct action is a phrase that gets thrown around a lot when describing anarchist tactics. And rightly so, since it's one of the main ways anarchists put our values of autonomy, self-organization, and mutual aid into practice. So, what is it exactly? Well, a simple definition would be to say that direct action is a political action aimed at achieving a specific goal or objective, and which is carried out directly by an individual or group of people without appealing to a higher authority for legitimacy. Now, this broad definition covers a huge range of activities, everything from banner drops to prison breaks, and it doesn't necessarily tell us much about the politics of those carrying out the action itself. Direct actions are tactics, meaning that they are a specific type of action that can be used to implement a wide variety of strategies. While you don't have to be an anarchist in order to carry out or to participate in a direct action, the concept itself holds a special importance for anarchists and other anti-authoritarian radicals. And that's because well-timed and well-executed direct actions can offer an escape from the endless cycle of representational politics, which assumes its highest form in the state.
You see, guys? It's not violence. It's direct action. That doesn't mean it's violence. It's just direct action. It's a defensive maneuver from the oppression that's happening to them. It's not violence. You saw the images. Lighting buildings on fire. Assaulting police officers. That's direct action. So in the communist mind, they're like, it's not violent. I'm defending myself when I light a building on fire.
These traditional methods, like, blocking a train that people were doing 100 years ago, could still work.
Right.
Yeah. I think militant, this is part of why law is important, is, a lot of the most militant labor tactics are illegal in the U.S. And if they're not illegal in other places. And if you do them, your union president will get arrested. And that kind of tamps down on the militancy. But when you have these new organizations, or you have a grassroots led movement, sort of like, the Red State Rebellion, we've talked about this before, Jamie, in West Virginia and Oklahoma, where the teachers kind of did wildcat strikes. It doesn't matter if what they're doing is illegal. You can't arrest them all. And you need teachers to teach. As we're learning with COVID-19, when you don't have an education system, you don't have that childcare, the built-in childcare, the economy grinds to a halt. So yeah, that seems pretty important.
And the way to achieve that future is through revolutionary agitation and ultimately violence. Now, I want to point out that this is a really bad take.
Yeah, Lindsay, you stupid fat shithead. It's not a violent revolution. It's just endless droves of feral communists that want to protest illegally with direct action, and they use large numbers of people to overwhelm the system in order to get what they want. It's not a violent revolution. It's direct action. And if the police catch you, they're not going to put you in jail. They're just going to temporarily set you aside for a moment. And if you went to someone's house and tried this shit, they're not going to murder you. They're just going to put you to sleep for a really long time.
Yeah, and how race and class combine,
yeah.
especially in this particular country. I mean, there's people out there who are like, oh, well, if you talk about anything but class, then you're doing Marxism wrong. But that does a disservice to Marx, because Marxism is not just the study of bosses and workers. Yes, that is the central relationship that all society runs on, but it is also the study of social relations. And race is a social relation.
Guess what the social part is? Is critical race theory.
And race is a social relation that is tied to class as well. So if you leave that part out, you're not going to have a very good analysis of what's going on with American capitalism at all. I think it's also important, and this is a huge part of why I valued it so highly, that this uprising, to the degree that it was led by anyone, it was led by Black proletarians. And I think any kind of attempt at a revolution in this country is going to have to heavily involve the Black proletariat.
It's not race Marxism. They're just solely focused on the proletariat's race. It's not race Marxism. They just replaced poor people with black poor people.
Yeah,
they had
liberal, exactly.
They did the same thing, which is
they are not surprising that
campmans.
liberals would do that. Not surprising to me, but
not surprising to me at all. Yeah,
scratch a liberal and a fascist bleeds.
Sam Seder had a radical communist, anti-liberal co-host for years. He is not the progenitor of her beliefs. She was already a communist, but he platformed her and allowed her to get a larger following to spread her harmful ideas. It's the iron law of woke projection. Whatever they say about Nazis and racist dog whistling, it's their commie dog whistling to tear down the country and instill they don't even know what. When you leave a communist unchecked and you don't censor what they're saying and you encourage them to speak, all they're going to do inevitably every time is prove James Lindsay correct.